I was told by Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine is waiting for you upstairs in the bedroom and she wants to show you something. He immediately began brainwashing me. Had helicopters chase me, cars chasing me. Recently, I saw drones outside of my living room. I sincerely believe that this is what Jeffrey Epstein was truly doing here on this planet. He was bringing back hell on Earth.
Hey guys, it's Jakson with TMZ here. I just had an extremely informative and compelling interview with someone that was closely connected to Jeffrey Epstein for years. Now, with the DOJ recently releasing millions of files, a lot of redactions came with it, and naturally, it left the public asking a lot of questions. And what we've noticed over here is that there is a very high demand for people that want answers, not only from the government, not only from the DOJ and FBI and other various entities that are investigating people that were allegedly involved with Epstein, but from the people that were involved with Epstein themselves. I interview Rina Oh today. She's an Epstein survivor. She gives an extremely compelling testimony as to what life was like when she was involved with Epstein, how she got involved with him, the manipulation tactics that he used on a daily basis, and how he coerced her to do things she did not want to do. I want to put a trigger warning at the beginning of this video because what she does get into can be graphic for some viewers. Watch at your own discretion and let me know what you think in the comments because we read every single one. Let's get into it. So I'm joined today by Rina Oh, who is currently a visual artist based out of New York City, but she is also, unfortunately, a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein. Miss Oh, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So take us back. Obviously, you went through what is a very traumatic experience. Who were you before meeting Jeffrey Epstein, and how did you initially come into contact with him?
I met Jeffrey Epstein through my friend Lisa Phillips, who is also, a very outspoken Jeffrey Epstein survivor. And when I initially met him, he offered philanthropy and he called himself an art patron. I was lured in with a scholarship to go to college. And if you've paid attention to a lot of the recent news, Representative Jamie Raskin has launched an investigation into a lot of colleges and universities that were, involved with Jeffrey Epstein in some way, where the girls were being sent to these schools. And this established a long-term commitment from the victims, unknowingly, because we were being manipulated. We had no idea, and I had no idea. But he established a long-term commitment from me and used that in order to facilitate the abuse. So by offering me a scholarship to get a bachelor's degree for an undergraduate degree, that's 4 years of abuse. So he had established that in the beginning, but I had no idea walking into this. I thought, here's a great art patron. He told me, I'm giving you a scholarship with no strings attached. You never have to see me again. And then he attached a lot of strings to that scholarship.
So you met him through a mutual friend and Lisa Phillips. How was the meeting of Jeffrey Epstein conducted? Did you meet him in West Palm? Did you meet him in New York? Can you walk us through the moment where you first saw him?
Sure. So Lisa had met Jeffrey previously, and she met him on his island, Little St. James Island. And, she mentioned that there was this art patron. I was looking to pursue a career in the arts. I was not enrolled in college at the time. And she called the secretary to make an appointment. And we were there within a few days in New York.
So you walk in and you're in his residence in New York. What setting do you first see him in? Is he sitting at his desk? Is he in his living room?
No, it's very formal. He had a full-time butler and full-time, household staff and a private chef, which I found out about it. The private chef I didn't meet right away. So you ring the doorbell. It's a buzzer, and somebody asks, who is it? You state your name, and I'm here to see, Mr. Epstein or Jeffrey. We never called him Mr. Epstein. Actually, I think all the girls just called him Jeffrey. He will open the door, but not all the way. It would always just kind of creep a little bit open. like not even halfway through. It's kind of weird. And now the more I think about it, the creepier it seems. It was very dimly lit. It wasn't a foyer that was very bright. There were no visible windows. And once you walk in, the butler, whose name I never heard, he never introduced himself as nothing. Like he barely spoke to me at all during the 2 years that I went over to that house. Always gestured, like he was very formal. He would go like this and say, please, step into like this room. And it was on the left-hand side. And wait there until Mr. Epstein is ready to see you. And then he would leave and come back within a few minutes and then, just peer in and say, hello, Mr. Epstein is ready to see you. And I always had to follow him up the stairs. It was very formal. Like I was never he didn't just open the door and say like, hi, so-and-so, like, hi, Rina. He didn't know my name either. Or maybe he did know, but he never called me by my name. I didn't have the freedom to just walk around the house. He would always escort me up the stairs. And so on the first day, Lisa and I followed him after waiting in the sitting room, up the stairs and into the study, which is more of a office-like setting. I just call it the study. It's not the formal living room. A lot of people confuse that room as the living room, but it's not.
So you go in there and he's sitting in his study. And how does he greet you? Is there anything that kind of took you by surprise? Was he charismatic?
He was very charismatic. He was a very outgoing, well-spoken person, very friendly. I think he gave Lisa a kiss on the cheek. I don't think he gave me a kiss on the cheek because we had just met, and I don't recall if I shook his hand. I may have, like, this is 2 decades ago, so those little details I would have to, sit on it and think hard. Um, and he was like, hey, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while. Like to Lisa, like, like, what are you up to? Like he had a lot of questions for her. And then he turned his attention onto me and I was like, what's your name? And, I said, my name is Rina. What do you do? Like, what's that? I brought my portfolio with me. So he pointed at it and said, what did you bring? And I said, I'm an artist. He's like, oh, you're an artist. He's like, and what is that? And I was like, I brought, pictures of my artwork. It's a portfolio. And he's like, can I see? So then I handed it to him and he spent a decent amount of time looking through every single page in this portfolio. And he particularly liked the sculptures. Now, like, going back to the type of training I received as a sculptor, I studied sculpture in a cathedral in New York City. And I have a tendency to absorb the environment because I was studying sculpture at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. My work was very biblical and very holy at the time. And he was very much drawn to those sculptures, and more specifically, the one of the mother and child and all these angelic figures celebrating the birth of a son. This is the mother. It's not the Virgin Mary because like I hate using like ideology. I just call it adoration of the mother and child. But he particularly liked that piece. And there's a reason why later on he asked me to have his baby.
Really? It seems like there is a huge contrast between when you're walking into a study and you're first meeting him, he takes an interest in your art, and then down the line, you enter this period where he's asking you to have his baby. What happened in between those two events to where he was slowly coercing you into doing things that you perhaps didn't want to?
He pushed my boundaries every time I saw him. He gave me books to read, and he immediately began brainwashing me, and he knew with me the whole like massage thing, like give me a massage for $200 thing, would not have worked. I would have walked out of there. He used a different method to manipulate me. He knew that wouldn't have worked on me, so he used art, but I still ended up in that room. And things still happened to me against my will in that room. And there were a lot of other people who I just at this point call them co-conspirators who abused me along with him. He wasn't the only one in that room. Like a lot of strangers would just show up. I don't want to go into the details because I'll disassociate and I want to stay in the present. So I don't like talking about the details. By giving me books to read, he indoctrined his ideology, and his ideology was a polygamous empire that he told me he was planning on building. Like it's, in the beginning, I read the books. I thought it was just an idea. I was studying history books. He kept talking about it, and most of our conversations revolved around this harem. And I know, like in other countries, they call it the harem, but here in America, he called it harem. That's why I pronounce it that way. He told me I was going to be a favorite, and I was going to be part of Babylon. So now referring back to the religious artwork that I made, and him telling me I was going to be a part of Babylon. At that age, I had no idea that Babylon is the most grotesque, disgusting, unholy place that is mentioned in scripture in the Bible, in the Old Testament and the New Testament. I sincerely believe that this is what Jeffrey Epstein was truly doing here on this planet. He was building or rebuilding Babylon. He was bringing back hell on earth. Because if you read the Bible, the children of God, they're looking to build heaven on earth, a peaceful place. And he was looking to build the opposite of that. And he told me I was going to be a part of it. And then as he handed me the books, from that day going forward, he constantly talked about me having this baby with the Sultan. And he was the Sultan, obviously, in this Babylon world that he built for himself.
Just hearing, your firsthand account of how you were coerced into doing those things is absolutely sickening. And I'm so sorry. But I want to commend you for being able to sit here today and talk to me about it. So it's very brave of you, and thank you so much. And I'm sure you've heard this from other people, but your testimony is going to help girls, whether they were, connected with Epstein or not, to speak out about their own abuse and the situations that they were in. So again, it's very commendable. It's very brave of you. It sounds like he had a very egocentric way of manipulating the people around him to do his bidding. What was the turning point to where you had realized, you are building this relationship with him, starting out where you believe he's an art patron and he takes interests in your interests, and it makes you feel a certain way. But then there's a turning point, right, where you realize this actually isn't what I thought it was going to be. What was that turning point? And again, if this turning point is something you don't want to talk about, I'm not going to press the issue and we can move on.
Well, he said I never had to see him again. During the second meeting with him is when he offered the scholarship. Nothing happened that day. He didn't touch me. It seemed like a legitimate meeting. Although I had to watch him get a full body massage in the massage room. But it was a normal massage. He didn't engage in anything with that female massage therapist. She actually was a certified professional massage therapist. And everything seemed kind of kosher, like normal. I accepted the offer, told me, please follow up with my secretary, go to School of Visual Arts, select 2 classes. He dictated exactly where I was going to go to school. He didn't ask me, Rina, what school would you like to go to? Like, if you could, pick an art school, the school of your dreams, what would it be? I would have probably answered Parsons School of Design because I always wanted to study fashion design, but that's not what happened. He just told me, I think you should be in school. I think you're really talented. And I am offering you a full scholarship to go to the School of Visual Arts because that's where I think you should go to school. And if you want to be successful in the art world, you need to have a college degree. So, then I went to the school. He dictated, go down to the school, pick up a catalog, pick out 2 summer classes, and then follow up with the secretary. And then, she will make all the arrangements. So there was payment that was made for the classes, but I never saw the transaction. It probably was made and, sent directly either probably by check from his office to the School of Visual Arts. At that time, I had no idea how involved Jeffrey Epstein was with the art world, as I'm going through the files, but I always kind of knew. But now we have the evidence that he was controlling the art market too. Like he didn't just have his hands on politicians and royalty, billionaires, and then all the girls he victimized. He was also involved heavily in the art world. And I could go on and on about that, in another interview because it's so in depth. And I always had a sense of that. So after I no longer saw him, I disassociated from practicing and pursuing, my visual arts practice. He said he was this philanthropist, and after on day 2, he said, "You never have to see me again." But then I felt this obligation. He kept calling. The secretary kept calling to have me return to the house. And it escalated very quickly. It was abuse, nothing but abuse for 2 years. He never took me out of the house. Like I never went out to dinner with him, to any events with him. In New York, when I was in Florida, I traveled there for about a week. I was taken out, but it wasn't a regular outing. We went out as a group. It was Jeffrey, Ghislaine Maxwell, and then another girl who was staying at the house with me. We weren't giving access to transportation in Florida. He had a car, he had a butler down there too, chauffeur butler, and Ghislaine had a car. But the other girl and I were just stuck in the house waiting until, we had the privilege to leave the house for an hour. And when we did go out, we had to walk behind them like they were above us, in hierarchy. That's how we were treated. And the way he described the harem, this is exactly how he lived. And this is how he treated the girls. It was a great hierarchy. Ghislaine obviously ranked much higher than probably all the girls in this harem network. Secret world, because everything was to be kept a secret. And that is how harems were built throughout, history. And Turkey is not the only country, just to, set the record straight. I've given other interviews and people were commenting saying, Turkey's not the only country that had harems. I'm like, yes, I'm very much aware of that. So this is what he was planning from the beginning. And he was planning on having multiple wives. And he asked me to become one of those wives and have a baby with him. And this is all based on that one sculpture he saw that first time I met him. He just saw a candidate to carry a baby.
It's so sickening because, when you look at some of the things the DOJ has released, there are some emails in these files that suggest an interest of his was designer babies, human cloning, and things to that effect, which, is just awful. It seems like he had this obsession with seeding the human race, and it kind of plays into the angle that he believed himself a king. He thought himself a king, and he thought himself as this emperor, like you say. And it almost sounds like what you're intimating is that, it was satanic. I don't think there's any other word for, his kind of psychology or his belief system. It was just plain satanic. Would you say that's accurate?
I would say it's the opposite of what is good. If that's what that is, he called it Babylon. And if you read the Bible, Babylon is the opposite of everything that is holy. So whatever it is that he was doing, it was nothing but blasphemy. So is that satanic? Probably, but there are other religions, other cults that also are the opposite of good, that, where people engage in all these nefarious acts and it's evil, it's blasphemy against the Lord. It doesn't necessarily have to be that religion. I just call everything that's not good. he was into worshiping evil and darkness. But he made it sound like it was a good thing. And I had no idea that Babylon was the opposite of the Holy Land, because he never talked about the actual Bible. He didn't talk about anything other than Babylon. So I was brainwashed into thinking this Babylon he was talking about was the harem. I associated Babylon with the harem.
Well, there's something to be said there, right? To be led down a path that's so intrinsically evil, and to come out on the other side of it.
But that's how I've changed after what I went through that experience. I was a lot more open and of receiving different people and not as judgmental. I didn't see black and white. I accepted all the gray areas of morality. Post Jeffrey Epstein, I am able to have that spiritual discernment. I've turned into a lie detector basically because he lied to me so much. He was a raging, malignant narcissist, and it really is horrible when you go through narcissistic abuse. I don't know if you've ever gone through it. I don't want you to go through it, but a lot of people have suffered from narcissistic abuse. If they can't relate to the physical trauma, the sexual trauma that the victims and survivors have gone through, they could probably relate to narcissistic abuse. A lot of people have experienced this in their lifetime, young or old. And that's essentially what it was in a nutshell. But there's that spiritual element. He didn't just abuse the body. He didn't just colonize the brain. He also abused the spirit, the soul of these girls. And that's what he did to me. And that gave him ultimate pleasure. Wasn't the physical abuse. It was actually breaking the soul was his goal, was to break our souls. It is so evil and so grotesque. And most people don't know this and they don't talk about it. They don't talk about that aspect of what he was doing. And not just with the girls. I think he was doing this with everyone around him. He was a mastermind manipulator.
It's just so sadistic hearing it, yeah, I struggle to find the words, to be honest, to react to hearing something like that.
It's scary, actually.
It is scary that people, I'll tell you this, it's scary that human beings like that can exist. If you can call him that.
He's still human. I don't know. They refer to the beast a lot in the Bible, and I would think he was closer to living his life through the image of the beast instead of the image of God. And God is love, and Jeffrey represents hate and evil and sacrilegious, shenanigans. Everything that he did was sacrilege, and he made him happy. He actually fed off of the sacrilege. He loved evil things. And the more I got to know him, the more I saw the evil in his eyes. You could sort of when you meet someone that's really evil, just sense the darkness around them. And when I started seeing how excited he got, to hurt others, to hurt me, it just that is where the depth of the trauma lies in my body. And I do have it stored in a lot of different places, and I'm working with a lot of different providers, therapists who are helping me cope. We haven't gotten there yet, but there is an actual physical trauma your body stores, the severe trauma physically, mentally, physically, spiritually, and he did all of the above.
Again, it's awful to hear that, but it's encouraging to hear that you're receiving the right help, and mental health is obviously an enormous part of the process of recovery. I've been lucky enough to not have been put in a position like yours, so I just can't imagine the trauma. But again, it's encouraging to hear. You mentioned something earlier where you took a trip to Florida, and you were in the presence of Ghislaine Maxwell. Can you go into the type of person Ghislaine Maxwell was? How did she conduct her relationship with you, and Epstein and the people around her? What was she like?
She was very full of herself. She's an absolute classist would be the best way to describe her. She enjoyed her privilege of being of a higher and distinguished social class, where she spent her entire life growing up and being surrounded by privileged people of the higher social class, the creme de la creme of the world, politicians, wealth, trust fund, babies, what have you. And she made it very obvious to everyone around her, like, you are not an equal to me. So she was very like offstandish, snobby, not very friendly or approachable unless the girls worked for her directly. And now Virginia Giuffre was hired by Ghislaine Maxwell. She was an employee of Ghislaine Maxwell. And so was this other girl, Joanna. So I met Joanna in New York only once. But the way I saw the interaction with Ghislaine and the girls who followed her around, I can tell that they listened to her mainly, and I wasn't one of them. So I was excluded from this little clique that she had going on. And she wasn't a very approachable person, friendly person, unless you were one of her girls or one of her like good friends. Like you had to come, like she had to source the person, whether it's like a personal assistant or someone that she hired, like Virginia or Joanna. She hired her to like, answer phone calls, but that's not what she ended up doing. She ended up doing other things. Or she had her own townhouse eventually, and she probably had a chauffeur. Like those are her people. If you're not one of her people, like she just basically was very like offstandish, like, what are you doing here? And that's how she treated me.
Much like you did with Epstein, can you walk me through the first time you met Ghislaine Maxwell? And you said she was a classist. She seems like she was very full of herself. What interaction can you remember that you had with her that signified to you, oh, this person is a little bit too full of himself, maybe a little bit of a narcissist?
Well, narcissist I didn't get right away because I had not gone through the full-blown narcissistic abuse at that time. Like when I first met Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, it was after I left that I started reading about it because it really bewildered me why I felt the way I did. And for years, I probably studied narcissistic personality disorder for about a decade, still trying to understand. And now I see the narcissist everywhere I go, right? She just came off as someone that was insincere, not genuine, but she had known who I was. She introduced herself to me when I was waiting in that sitting room one day. And I thought she was just a friend that was visiting, that was very comfortable around, that house in New York, the townhouse, because she was free to come and go whenever she wanted. I didn't see the butler escorting her out the front door. Now, he also escorted all the guests out the front door. He didn't just bring the guests in, make you sit in the waiting room, take you upstairs. He also took us outside, like took the girls or took me like to the door. I was like, literally, you were not allowed to just roam around the house. She was roaming around the house. And when I was in the sitting room, she, popped her head in and said, hi, like, who are you? And I answered, hi, my name is Rina. She's like, oh, you're Rina. You're all Jeffrey ever talks about. And like she squealed, but I could tell it wasn't like a sincere hello. And she was annoyed with me. She was like, oh, you're all he ever talks about. Like, what are you doing here? It felt immediately like she didn't like me, and she didn't like me before I even met her.
Was there ever a turning point? Obviously, you didn't really grasp the full foundation of what makes a narcissist until you got out of that environment. But was there ever a time? Is there a time that you remember during where you went, "Oh, I don't like this person. Oh, she gives me very bad vibes." Did she ever snap at you or anything like that?
She showed me her closet of like disgusting things that she probably used to hurt, like physically hurt the girls in Florida. And she showed it to me with like while grinning, almost like she wanted to do something to me. I was told by Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine is waiting for you upstairs in the bedroom and she wants to show you something. I was just like, oh my God, like, why are you sending me upstairs? Like, I thought she was going to abuse me, like essay me. And I went up the stairs and he took me upstairs. I thought something was going to happen between like her and him and me, and I would get victimized again because this wouldn't be the first time. But instead, like she just said, Rina, come over here. And she, opened the closet and said, I have something to show you. And the whole closet was filled with like all these things that are now showing up in the pictures in in the files. I suspect that she was physically assaulting, physically abusing, victims. I can't say who they are because I didn't witness it, but that stuff was there and it belonged to her. That was her closet because Jeffrey said she has something to show you in her closet. He didn't say that's my closet. He said Ghislaine has something to show you in her closet.
Mm-hmm. And Rina, I want to be gentle in approaching the subject because again, I don't want to, step over a boundary of, boundaries that you've set regarding things you don't want to talk about. Would you be open to discussing exactly what you saw in the closet?
Probably not because I may start disassociating a little bit.
Absolutely. It's absolutely fine.
I have a tendency to see images, memories are stored. It's like a motion picture. And for me, like I'll start having flashbacks of other things related to that time period. So I just don't want to, there's something
Absolutely
I'm talking about.
Don't even worry about it. We don't need to approach it at all. But thank you for mentioning it. You give a very compelling testimony, Rina.
To say, but I am writing about it in the story that I'm working on right now. I'm almost finished writing my book. It will really help people understand this evil man because, like most people, like I said before, they don't realize that he was truly evil. This was spiritual abuse more than anything else. And I know he wanted to seed the planet. There are all these things that he was doing, but why does it not make sense? But when you add the spiritual aspect and his ideologies, which, it could have been a religion, then all of it comes together and makes sense. This was truly evil, what he was doing.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned previously that you had the opportunity to interact with Virginia Giuffre. What was she like, and what was the relationship between her and Epstein like? Do you ever remember her saying something that gives you pause today that mightn't have back then?
I thought she was working for Ghislaine Maxwell, or that she was like a family friend, like she could be the daughter of like Ghislaine's friend, but she was clearly like around Ghislaine more. That's how I saw her role. I didn't think anything was happening between her and Jeffrey Epstein, but I know she was at the house for Ghislaine Maxwell. When I was in Florida, she was at the house every day. Although when I did see her leaving the house with another girl, her and her friend were picked up by her ex-boyfriend at the time, whom I also met. I did start thinking like, like, is she one of the girls? Like, she's bringing girls to the house and, what is she doing here? She's here every day. But I didn't see her like, let's say like in a room or anything like that. And when she did come into the house, I don't recall like her and Jeffrey being alone. Like, I saw her like by the pool. There's a pool and a cabana and behind the house in Palm Beach. I was sitting there with a group of women. Ghislaine was there too, and she strolled in and waved hi to everyone, blew a kiss at Jeffrey Epstein, and then he still sat there. So I had no clue even then what was going on with her. She did at one time tell me that Ghislaine and Jeffrey asked her to have a baby for them. So if I can name anyone who actually wanted to carry his child, would be Ghislaine Maxwell was the only person that actually wanted to have his baby. I don't know if he asked anyone else to have a baby with him, but she, I think, desperately wanted one. And at that time, she was close to 40 years old. I think maybe her eggs were going bad, or maybe she didn't want to carry a baby and they were looking for a surrogate. I have no idea, but she was a very entitled person, someone who most likely would have never even changed a diaper type of person. She probably would have had like 3 nannies or nannies around the clock that rotated. And I do see some women who rather pay a surrogate $100,000 so that they don't get stretch marks, and she's that type of person. Like, that's really entitled. That's entitlement right there. It's like, I'm not even carrying my own child, but I want this baby so that I can, I don't know, like, own everything. Yeah, but
Rina, your testimony has been absolutely fantastic. Again, thank you so much for coming on. One last question. There is so much movement and there are so many headlines in the media regarding this case. And it seems like a lot of information has either been redacted or the waters have been muddied, so to speak. If you could give the public a message regarding the case, regarding Epstein, whether it be, how the DOJ has handled the release of the files, anything at all, what would it be?
I think at this point, the citizens have to come together and start taking action because our government isn't doing enough. If that means everyone gathers together and we peacefully protest in 50 states across the country and do this nonstop until, people start being held accountable and just resigning from their, position as a CEO, president of a Fortune 500 company or from a prestigious Ivy League school is not enough. They were doing other things. If they are resigning, like, they're guilty of something, and there needs to be a full investigation. If the government isn't doing anything about it other than asking them to give a deposition under oath, in foreign countries, people are getting arrested. They're reading all of their records. They're searching through their bank statements and financial records and, search and seizure. Here, not enough is happening. And I'm wondering how many people are compromised in the United States, because this was where he lived. I do see a lot of videos online. I see people are really angry. They want action. I think the citizens should start taking action.
When you bring that up, one more question, and I think it's an important one. When you bring up things like peaceful protests, the things you're talking about might rub people in power the wrong way. And are there ever any moments when you're speaking out about your experience that you fear for your safety?
I've been going through this for 7 years now, where people have been stalking me, threatening me. I've received death threats. I have had helicopters chase me, cars chasing me. Recently I saw drones outside of my living room window. And it's like, you have nothing to film. I'm in my kitchen, like cooking dinner. It's like go away. I'm already used to it. I'm already used to being harassed. No, I'm not afraid. And when I say protest, I meant more of a peaceful march.
Yeah.
Protest sounds combative. When I say peaceful march in support of survivors and support of the victims, and also in support of the truth.
And I would like you to, again, confirm here, you are receiving help for your trauma. You're receiving help on the mental health side and everything you're dealing with physically and mentally. And
I am, and I actually have to run now because I have to go see my therapy horse, which I haven't seen her in a while.
Go for it. You go and say hello for me. Rina, you've been absolutely fantastic.
Sure. I have a podcast that is launching soon. It's called Revelations with Rina Oh. and Revelations. It's based on the book of Revelation in the Bible. And my book will be released sometime later on this year. And I don't have a lot of Instagram followers. If you want to follow me, find me at Rina Oh Artist. And I'm on Instagram. And you can see my artwork there, the biblical work, and also my activism work. And I do speak out and protect those who are heavily trafficked every year. No one talks about the 40 million people that go missing every year. We're just constantly talking about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. But I also think he was involved with the 40 million people that go missing every year. We can continue this conversation next time and go into more detail about that.
Rina, you've been absolutely incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.